Harold was 68, a man with grey hair and a heart full of memories that weighed more than the years on his shoulders. For most people, his old Chevrolet Impala was nothing more than rust on wheels, a relic that belonged in the junkyard. But for Harold, it was the last living link to his late wife. Together, they had driven across the country in that car, singing with the windows down, chasing sunsets, and dreaming of the future. Every dent and scratch carried a memory, every mile a story. That was why Harold could never let it go. The problem was that the Impala no longer ran. The engine coughed like a sick old man, the tires sagged, and the paint had peeled away until only dull patches of color remained. He had taken it to several mechanics in town, but most laughed at him, shaking their heads and saying, "Sir, it's time to let her go." Their words cut deeper than he let on. For them, it was just metal and bolts. For Harold, it was love, history, and the memory of holding his wife's hand on long drives through endless roads. One quiet afternoon, Harold stumbled upon a small garage at the edge of town. The sign was faded, the place modest, but something told him to try one last time. Inside, he found Mia, a young woman of 27, with grease on her hands and determination in her eyes. She looked up from under the hood of a truck and smiled politely. "What can I do for you, sir?" Harold hesitated, embarrassed by how foolish his request might sound, but finally explained how much the old Impala meant to him. He braced himself for laughter, but Mia didn't laugh. Instead, she listened carefully, wiping her hands on a rag, and walked with him to see the car. She ran her hands over the rusted hood, tapped the side of the fender, and then peeked inside at the worn seats. "It's seen better days," she said honestly, "but it's not impossible." Harold blinked, not believing what he was hearing. For the first time, someone didn't tell him to give up. Mia looked him in the eye and added, "If it matters this much to you, then it matters to me too. I'll help you bring her back." From that day on, Mia poured herself into the project. She worked late into the evenings, sometimes long after the garage should have closed, carefully rebuilding the engine piece by piece. When Harold saw her replacing old parts with new ones, he asked nervously about the cost, but Mia simply shook her head. "Don't worry about that right now," she said softly. "This isn't just a job to me. It's about giving you back a piece of your life." Harold couldn't remember the last time someone had been so kind. Watching her work reminded him of the kindness his wife used to show. Days turned into weeks, and every time Harold visited, he saw progress. The engine, once dead, began to sputter with life. The seats, though still worn, were cleaned and stitched with care. Mia even polished the dashboard until it gleamed faintly under the garage lights. Harold often sat nearby telling her stories of his wife, how they had camped in the mountains, how she once fell asleep in the passenger seat as the Impala rolled through the desert at dusk. Mia listened with quiet respect, her heart softening with every tale. This wasn't just a repair, it was a resurrection. One evening, Harold stood outside the garage as Mia turned the key in the ignition. The Impala roared to life, its voice, rough but strong, like an old singer finding his tune again. Harold's eyes filled with tears, and his voice cracked when he whispered, "She's alive." Mia grinned proudly, her hands still smudged with oil. "She's got a lot more miles left in her," she said, patting the hood. In that moment, Harold felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. The Impala wasn't just a car anymore. It was proof that love and memories could be reborn. The next morning, Harold returned to the garage with a box in his hands. Inside were faded photographs of him and his late wife, standing proudly by the Impala on their wedding day, her veil fluttering in the wind, his arm around her waist. He showed them to Mia, his voice trembling with emotion. "This car carried us through every chapter," he explained. Mia studied the photos quietly, touched by the history behind the machine she had been restoring. For her, it was no longer just about fixing a vehicle. It was about honoring a love story that had outlived time. Over the following week, Mia took extra steps to make the car feel new, without erasing its memories. She sourced parts from scrapyards and online auctions, hunting for details that would preserve its soul. She even repainted the Impala, not in a glossy, modern shade, but in its original deep blue, carefully chosen to match the photo Harold had shown her. When he saw it, Harold's breath caught in his chest, and for a moment he was transported back 40 years, standing beside his young bride, watching the sun bounce off the car's shiny hood. Mia didn't stop there. With Harold's stories as her guide, she added small details that would matter only to him. She fixed the radio so it could play the old country stations his wife used to love. She stitched a small heart onto the seat cover, hidden but there, just like the quiet love Harold carried inside him every day. Each touch carried meaning, and Harold realized Mia wasn't just a mechanic. She was an artist, someone who saw beyond steel and wires into the heart of what things meant to people. The day of completion finally arrived. Mia called Harold to the garage and handed him the keys with a smile that betrayed her excitement. "She's yours again," she said warmly. Harold's hands trembled as he slid into the driver's seat, the smell of fresh leather mixing with the faint scent of oil. When he turned the key, the Impala started instantly, its engine humming with strength. Tears streamed down his face as he clutched the steering wheel. "It feels like she's here with me again," he whispered. Mia stood silently, her throat tight, knowing she had given him back more than just a car. Harold insisted Mia join him for a drive. Together, they cruised down the quiet country roads, the Impala rolling smoothly as the sun dipped low in the sky. Harold talked about how his wife used to rest her head on his shoulder while he drove, how they once got caught in the rain but laughed the whole way home. Mia listened, her chest aching with the weight of his memories, realizing she had become a small part of this love story, simply by caring enough to help. She smiled at the thought that her skills had made such a difference. When they pulled back into town, a small crowd had gathered outside the garage. Neighbors and friends who had long doubted the Impala could ever run again stared in awe as Harold parked. "I thought that car was finished," one man said. "Looks brand new." Harold grinned, pride shining through his tears, and gestured toward Mia. "This young woman brought her back to life," he declared. The crowd applauded, and Mia flushed with pride, humbled by the recognition, but even more moved by the joy on Harold's face. From that day forward, Harold and Mia's bond grew into something rare. He would visit the garage often, not because the Impala needed repairs, but because he enjoyed her company. He told her stories about resilience, about holding on to love when the world tried to take it away. In return, Mia shared her own struggles of being underestimated as a woman in a field dominated by men. They became unlikely friends, connected by a shared respect for hard work, memory, and heart. For Harold, the Impala was alive again. For Mia, so was her belief in why she chose this path.